Welcome back. I am Marcello Costa, Emeritus Professor of Flinders University, and I'm giving you the last part of a series of talks on From Art to Science, in Search of Reality. At the end of the part number 7, I talked to you about the visual system and how it extracts from an external world separate components and brings them together as a single percept, what has been called the binding problem. In the last part, I'm going to talk to you about painting, art of painting, as a form of exploration of the mind. First, I'll deal with the abstract painting and how this may in fact give some ideas how the brain works. The development of illusions in painting, the creation of new realities, the great imagination of our brain, and then the painting to express inner feelings increasingly, emotions, all the way to alter a state of consciousness. And I will make some conclusions. Let's see how we go. Abstract painting is something that happened indeed during last century. This is a painting called Enigma by Isia Levian, and you can see, everybody can see, that this painting is not still. It gives an impression of some movement. This was discovered by the painters themselves, playing, in a way, with images. This equally well known by Bridget Riley, a fall. This definitely looked like some water that is falling down all the time. These are simple, almost tests that will generate similar feeling or some movement, despite the fact these are very still pictures. Another one, and another one. This looks like wheels are slowly rotating. So the illusion of movement is something very profound in our brain that can be generated by images. So the question arises as to what neural processes are behind this illusion of movements. This was investigated by indeed Conboy and colleagues back in 2005 in the Journal of Neuroscience with the title of a paper, Neural Basis for a Powerful Static Motion Illusion. They use one of these paintings and they indeed show in a monkey visual cortex recording electrical activity, they found that there were some neurons in this visual cortex that were activated by this picture. The same neurons were responsive to actual movement. These are called direction-selective neurons. So the static picture was able to stimulate those neurons. So this proved that the illusion is real. Illusion is due to the fact that this drawing activate the same neurons that are activated when you actually see things moving. Now, the illusion of our brain continues. We can see shapes which are not there. Why? Because our brain can fill in shapes of missing parts. A good example is this triangle. Okay, you can fit in the triangle easily, but you see nothing else. What if you add these little shapes? Suddenly, you can see this other triangle, a white triangle with no lines. Your brain sees not only this outline triangle with black line, but also this triangle that really does not exist. So you see the power of the brain to build up some images which are not there. Another example, these are clearly 4 shapes, but there's no square there, but our brain does see the square. This was obviously done already last century by this neuroscientist from Trieste, Canizza, who play with this enormously to interpret also how the brain is actually normally operating. Well, other artists saw this very well. You can see with the little incomplete images, you can see clearly a dog. Those of you that have even better imagination can see here somebody riding a horse with the front leg, the back leg, the head, and here's the rider. Now, it takes some, call it imagination, but your brain is normally working in that way. This is also a very well famous picture showing a park and seeing, I hope you do see like me, a dog. The head, front legs, back leg. So you can see that the brain is actually filling in patterns to create, indeed, a binding and the experience of visual pictures. Of course, abstract painters of last century, Gino Severin in 1911, 1912, painted this indeed, very famous painting as well, and you can see some dances very clearly. Other more modern one in the 1930s, this Victor Vasarely, you can see this modern art. You can see these two people embracing. You can see two animals close to each other. But this is a form of abstract art that gives you an illusion of what you're actually seeing. We come to the paradoxes of Escher, of course, the famous drawing hands. The two hands actually draw each other. A very good idea of perhaps our mind actually makes itself. You can see this shifting from water and sky, or sky and water, back in 1938. A kind of a shifting perception from one experience to another in a kind of continuous, playing very clearly with these illusions. So abstract painting is a kind of pictorial exploration of the working of the visual brain. Indeed, take this Jove Stella, this American painters in 1914, the battle of lights, imagining a city with a lot of lights and how a person with that experience will experience this cacophony of images and perhaps even sounds. It's like the brain is in search of patterns even when something is not clear out there. Well, Pollock made it in a proper art. Alarm in the Mist, 1950, this painting of nothing. And yet your brain is desperately trying to see some patterns. And so this painter really played on our brain, stimulating the brain, because this is what the brain does. It may not see everything clear, but it will try to make it clear. So how does the brain make sense of what is out there when it's not obvious? Can the brain expectation impose what we see out there? Well, indeed. Look at this. This is a piece of art. It's a psychological test. There are patterns of little symbols. Our brain cannot not detect circles here. There are no circles there. Some of them are grounded in circles, but you don't detect them in a fixed way. They keep changing. So this is our power of brain searching perhaps for the Platonic ideas of the circle. It's like the brain is already geared to search for very simple shapes. Take this other one, squares, but squares which are formed in a very irregular way, and yet you are searching and finding continually circles which are not there, but there's some hint that something is there and the brain makes it up, invents it, confabulates, constructs experiences of things which are not there. That's how the brain works. So, images of the world require a process of construction by the brain of what is perceived, even when the perception is not complete. Many of these processes are well embedded in our neural circuits and give us the sense of reality. That's very important. This is what the sense of reality is about. Of course, visual perception also elicits emotions. This is well known. I'm going to briefly explore this with you. And we come to the idea of painting beauty and emotions. Well, of course, Aristotle already in Phaedrus and the Symposium emphasizes beauty as something with an eternal presence aside individual participation. He tried to find something in the real world of being beautiful. Kant, in his critique of aesthetic judgment, shifted the emphasis to a search for the principles of beauty and aesthetic value in the perceiver. It began to put on us the burden of thinking that if something is beautiful is because we do attribute the sense of beauty to the world, and the world does not need to be in itself beautiful or not. It's our brains, ourselves, that do construct beauty. Indeed, Zeki and his colleagues started to work, and he concluded that the perception of different categories of painting are associated with distinct and specialized visual areas of the brain, that the orbitofrontal cortex is differentially engaged during the perception of beautiful and ugly stimuli. So you see here the beginning of identifying the parts of the brain which are responsible for giving the meaning of beauty to the world. Further studies, of course, were done in 2007 by Gothard and colleagues that actually expose monkeys to pictures of faces of other monkeys. Some monkey doing simply a lip smack, a neutral, or showing a threat. And they recorded the activity of the neurons in the amygdala, a very primitive part of the brain involved in emotions. You can see here what is called a raster. Each of these dots represent an activity of a single neuron in the brain, blip, 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 one and another neuron, another one. These are called a series of rasters. Then you add them together to form a histogram to see how active the neurons in these particular neurons are in the brain. You can see that when the activity of the amygdala in a particular monkey, when it's seeing a picture of another monkey doing a lip smack, there's very little firing, only a blip here and there, very low activity. When the face is neutral, also very low activity. When the face shows some threat, feeling, clear and emotional experience, this monkey amygdala neuron fire like hell. So there are specific neurons, and this is another example, another neuron. So there are neurons in the amygdala that when the monkey sees with the visual cortex all the way to the amygdala, activate specific neurons for frightful or frightening faces. So this is the first evidence that our brain is detecting emotionally fearful images by activating a specific part of the amygdala in a very specific way. This applies to us, not just to monkeys. This is a paper published in 2003 by Villemier and colleagues, that they tested a realistic image, one extracted, an abstract, and one like an impressionistic by blurring a bit the light, like an impressionistic painting. And they recorded the activity in the amygdala with the resonance imaging, functional MRI. What they found, indeed, is that there was a very high sensitivity of these impressionistic faces, from neutral to fearful, activating the amygdala, just like in monkeys. So, in a way, we are not very different from monkeys as far as detecting a sense of fear in the faces of our congeners. And we come to something more subtle but profound. Art always dealt with beauty, and beauty has always been related also to some emotion in relation to love, the amorous emotions, sex and attachments of the reproductive pathways in our brains, so important indeed in all mammals, and particularly, certainly in social animals like us. We go back a long time. Female figurines, pictures of female, were already portrayed a long time ago in prehistory. Of course, in about 5,000 years ago in Sparta, until recently, even recently in India, the classic Greece, portray the female body as an important component of this sense of beauty. In Egypt, 4000 BC, again, in the various level of the culture of Egypt, portrayed indeed all sort of images to do with the beauty and sex. Of course, you go to the ancient in Minoan and the Greek cultures in the island of Greece, of course in Babylon, become, of course, recently the famous Roman painting in Pompeii that was destroyed by the Vesuvium in 64 after Jesus Christ, in only 64 years after Christ. These wonderful paintings of naked women, a sense of beauty, no doubt. It was rediscovered after the decadence during the Christian period of painting, from indeed the decadence of Rome to the Renaissance, with the famous Botticelli, the Spring, an apotheosis of the female body. We come to the other emotions, of course. Troubling emotions like anxiety. Look, this Giorgio de Chirico, melancholy and mystery of a street. No doubt, this is a sense of something ominous about to happen. This is really the ability of painter to engender this deep sense of a mood, an anxiety, a subtle one. Of course, Delacroix, surprise, already portraying faces of humans, starting, of course, very well in the Renaissance, but really developing so well in the last 200 years. A picture of sadness, a migrant mother that is leaving the land and arriving perhaps to a new country, full of emotion, having left behind something, perhaps even in children. Even Picasso expressed so well this deep emotion, sorrow, in abstract painting. The very famous Munch, many painting of the Scream at the end of 1800, fright, a sense of really deep emotion. Going back to Leonardo da Vinci, Saint Jerome in the wilderness, a sense of desperation, of being abandoned by God. So this clearly shows a human face that will affect our amygdala so deeply. A sense of shame, painted already in a church in Florence by Masaccio in 1427. Sense of shame of being thrown out of paradise. Indeed, a sense of sadness, depression. What more this picture can tell you about it? Even showing human faces of people well known. What a courage of Francisco Goya. 1815, he was asked to paint the portrait of King Ferdinand VII. He was known to show no pity. Now, Francisco Goya showed very well this face, no pity. Who knows how this king saw himself? This very famous painting, of course, of most famous painting, of course, Guernica, and a tragic political tragedy of Pablo Picasso, that painted this soon after the bombing of Guernica, when Adolf Hitler ordered the German Air Force to bomb this Basque town on behalf of Franco, the fascist. What more you can show that the desperation and the ugliness, the cruelty of this war. This was a civil war, but involving the extreme right fighting the extreme left in a terrible war. Well, this shows how the power of painting in expressing emotions. Then we go into more abstract feelings, religion feelings, the tantric mandala, the Tibetan mandala, even abstract painting of a silk tapestry of China, feeling of, if you like, of blessing, feeling of abstraction, feeling of geometry far away from the present moment. But then become on a life, a real life, painting altered states of consciousness, when time and space can be affected at the composition of the self by drugs, some of psychedelics, happen in dream, during mystic experiences, and during mental diseases. These are caused by some drugs, like could be LSD. This painting during Amanita muscaria, which actually creates a sense of lack of self and going into another world. Again, psychedelic art, taking some drugs. This John Walser painted probably under the effect of drugs. Look, this cover of an album by Carlos Santana. The painting itself, this drawing itself, shows a great imagination, probably what people see under the effect of drugs, or dreaming state. Of course, in a modern discourse, right, with a party, music, light, and perhaps some drugs, it gives this a sense of being somewhere else, a search for another world. We come to the more realistic and sad and painful painting by schizophrenic mind. This is a painting by schizophrenic people. Look how similar they are to some of the painting of the modern art, who probably saw themselves changing themselves into somebody else, exactly what schizophrenics do. In a way, this shows the power of the mind and how the painting has been, indeed, an exploration of the mind. So this is the end of my part 8, the last part of my talks. In summary, I think of all this talk that I started with an introduction and 8 talks, that primitive painting indicated the importance of visual representation in human communication from the very beginning of human species. Pictorial realism was already rich in ancient Rome, but was lost in the Christian era, until indeed the Renaissance, when the pictorial realism and geometrical perspective was recovered in the Renaissance, the 1500s. Geometry of space became scientific since the 1600s to the present, with Galileo Galilei first, Newton and Einstein, and all modern physics. Geometry of space remained important as a result of the developing of the painting of geometry and the discovery of geometry in paintings. Then impressionism painting in the 1800s discovered the power of the observer in constructing visual images and preceded the psychology of vision. The painters really found themselves what the brain was doing to fill in the gaps. Then modern painting in 1900 and modern neuroscience from the 2000 on reveal the power of the mind in constructing novel visual experiences. In conclusion, at the end of this series of talks on art to science, I think that the human search of reality started in the prehistory with painting, with increasing realism, the discovery of reality. That there is a continuum between art and science. These are, as many said already, two sides of the same coin. So art and science are not only not opposed, but they continue with each other, and they share the same requirement of humans: imagination, attention, and skills, and discipline. Both consist in imagination, but constrain, but testing the human adequacy to the real world. This is the key of both art and science. An enormous ability of human imagination with all its traps, but the ability to test the world through art and eventually in science. I'd like to think that you enjoy this talk. If you have, or if you have some comment, critical or constructive or suggestion or suggesting thing that I might have missed or misinterpreted, please do write to me
And my email, I'm still at Flinders University, marcello.costa@flinders.edu.au for Australia. I'm Matthew Flinders, Distinguished Emeritus Professor of Flinders University, retired but still very active and keen to hear from you. Cheery up!